The lamp was still burning when he closed the bedroom door behind him, and I remember thinking the flame looked smaller than it did in my mother's kitchen. My wedding dress was folded on the chair. My prayer cap was on the dresser. My hands were shaking, and I did not know why, because I had been told my whole life that this was the happiest week a woman would ever have. He sat down on the edge of the bed and told me, in a voice that was not cruel and not kind, that a wife does not say no during the first week. He said it the way a man reads a rule out of a book. And then he said the first week is only the beginning. My name is Rebecca, and I grew up in an old-order Amish settlement in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. I left when I was 28, with 2 dresses, a small bag, and a silence I am still learning how to break. I tell the stories we were taught to swallow. If you grew up in a world where obedience was called love, tell me in the comments. Subscribe if you want to keep hearing the truths that never made it past the kitchen door. I read every message. I know how heavy it is to type them. To understand what happened in that bedroom, you have to understand the world outside of it. In our community, the ordnung was the unwritten agreement that shaped everything. It told us how to dress, how to speak, how to marry, how to grieve, how to bury our own questions before they could grow. The bishop was the voice of God to us, and the ministers were his hands. A girl was raised to be quiet, useful, and pleasing. A boy was raised to lead. That was the frame. But inside the frame, there were smaller rules, ones no one ever wrote down. The kind you only learned by watching the older women flinch at things no one else noticed. I was 19 when I married Amish. He was 22, from a well-respected family, the kind of family bishops trust. Our courtship was short and supervised. We rode home from singings in his open buggy. He was polite. He was quiet. My mother said quiet men make steady husbands. I believed her because I had nothing else to believe. The wedding was in November. The kitchen smelled of roast and celery and coffee. Women I had known my whole life kissed my forehead and whispered things I did not understand at the time. One of them held my hand a little too long and said, "Be strong this week, Rebecca." Just this week. I laughed, because I thought she meant the cooking, the guests, the long days. I did not know she was trying to warn me the only way she was allowed to. That first night, I learned what her hand had been trying to say. He told me the first week of marriage belongs to the husband. He said a wife who refuses her husband refuses God. He said it without anger, which was almost worse, because anger you can name. This was just a rule, spoken like the weather. I did not know how to answer. I had never been taught the word no in that room. I had been taught it everywhere else, gently, softly, until it was gone. The first week passed. And then he said, quietly, that a good wife does not stop being a good wife after 7 days. Every night, the lamp went out at the same time. Every night, I became smaller. I learned to breathe without sound. I learned to leave my own body the way you leave a room, quietly, without disturbing anyone. My mouth had no permission, but my body was learning to speak in ways I could not yet understand. Headaches. A back that would not straighten. Hands that shook when I poured coffee. I tried, once, to speak to my mother. I sat at her kitchen table and turned my cup in circles. I said, "Mem, is it always like this, in the beginning?" She did not look up from her sewing. She said, "A wife carries what she is given. That is her honor." She said it kindly. She said it the way you say a prayer you have said 1,000 times. And I understood then that she had carried it too, and her mother before her, and there was no door in that kitchen that led out of this. I went to see an older woman in the settlement, one of the ones who had held my hand at the wedding. I did not say the words. Our women do not say the words. I said, "I am tired." She looked at me for a long time. Then she said, "Some nights, Rebecca, you can pretend the lamp is already out." That was our language. That was how we warned each other. Not with sentences, but with sideways sentences. Not with truth, but with the shape of truth pressed into a rag and handed across a table. I went to the bishop only once. I did not tell him everything. I could not. I said my husband and I were having trouble in our marriage. He nodded, folded his hands, and told me that submission is the road to peace. He said a wife who prays enough will find her heart softened. He said the trouble was likely in me. He was not a monster. He believed what he was saying. He had been shaped by the same rules that shaped my husband, the same rules that shaped my mother's silence. That was the moment something in me cracked, quietly, like ice in a jar left too close to the window. I realized the cage was not Amos. The cage was the agreement every single person in that room had already signed before I was born. I stayed almost 9 more years. I do not say that with pride. I say it because it is true. I had no money of my own, no driver's license, no phone, no one on the outside. I had been told my whole life that the English world would swallow me. I had been told that leaving meant losing my soul, my family, my place at every table I had ever known. Shunning was not a word. It was a weather system. You could feel it coming across the fields. What finally moved me was not one big night. It was a small morning. I was standing at the sink, and my hands were in cold water, and I realized I could not remember the last time I had wanted anything for myself. Not food. Not a color. Not a walk. I had become so small there was almost nothing left inside me to refuse with. And I thought, if there is nothing left, there is nothing left to lose either. I left on a Tuesday. A woman I had met at a roadside stand drove me to a shelter 2 counties over. I wore a plain dress for 3 more weeks because I did not know how to wear anything else. The first therapist I ever spoke to used words I had never heard out loud. She said coercion. She said consent. She said your body was not a debt you owed him. I cried for an hour because someone had finally given me the vocabulary my community had spent a lifetime taking away. I want to be careful here. I am not telling you every Amish husband is like Amos. I am not telling you every bishop is cruel or every mother is cold. Most of them are not. Most of them are people who inherited a script and never got to read anything else. That is what makes it so hard to explain from the outside. The harm is not always in the shouting. Sometimes the harm is in the quiet, in the rule that was never written down, in the warmth that leaves the house 1 degree at a time until you do not remember what warm felt like. If you are watching this, and something in your chest tightened when I described that lamp, I want you to hear me. Your body was never a rule someone else got to write. Your no was not a sin. It was a sentence. A whole sentence. It did not need any words after it. It did not need permission. It did not need a bishop, a husband, a mother, or a book to make it real. I still dream in Pennsylvania Dutch sometimes. I still smell wood smoke and think of my mother's kitchen. I do not hate the place I came from. I grieve it, which is different. Grief means I loved something inside it, even if what I loved could not love me back on my terms. The silence in that bedroom was not holy. It was just silence. And silence, I have learned, is only sacred when you choose it. When it is placed over your mouth by someone else, it is not peace. It is a hand. I am Rebecca. I am not small anymore. And if no one has told you today, let me be the first. You are allowed to want a life that does not hurt to live inside. You are allowed to walk out of the room while the lamp is still burning. You are allowed, finally, to be the one who blows it out.